Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim-majority nation, and in early 2026, it attempted an unprecedented military entry into the Middle East. It was a massive geopolitical gamble that ended in a total collapse. The initiative followed a fragile ceasefire in Gaza in October 2025. The Trump administration established the Board of Peace, a transitional administration designed to coordinate Gaza's reconstruction outside of traditional United Nations channels. This document details the International Stabilization Force, the newly envisioned security presence for Gaza. In a major shift, President Prabowo Subianto pledged 8,000 Indonesian troops to serve as the force's backbone, accepting the high-profile role of deputy commander. This was a strategic goodwill gesture to Washington. By placing Indonesia at the center of Middle Eastern security architecture, Prabowo hoped to elevate his nation's international status and secure more favorable trade conditions with the United States. But for domestic critics, this bold bid for global influence looked like a structural trap, tethering a neutral nation to a partisan US-led military project. The first major friction point was a fundamental clash of missions. The US-backed coalition planned for the ISF to disarm Hamas, but Indonesia refused to act as a security enforcement agent for Israel. President Prabowo invoked strict national caveats. He restricted Indonesian troops to humanitarian and engineering roles and declared that the explicit consent of Hamas was a prerequisite for any deployment. This created an immediate deadlock. The US-Israeli vision demanded total demilitarization, while Hamas insisted they would only tolerate a passive observer force, acting as a ceasefire buffer. The second friction point was the risk of operating outside the United Nations. Because the Board of Peace was an ad hoc entity, Indonesian troops would operate without standard UN legal protections or neutral status. This lack of a multilateral framework left them vulnerable to being perceived as a direct party to the conflict. These structural flaws meant the mission lacked the political and legal legitimacy required to survive in such a volatile environment. Bypassing the UN system also meant bypassing UN funding. Indonesia had to finance this massive 8,000 troop deployment from its own budget, just as the national currency began to buckle under the strain of regional instability. This chart shows the financial burden. The Board of Peace draft charter included a $1 billion fee for a permanent seat. This 17 trillion rupiah expenditure on a speculative US venture sparked immediate outrage across Indonesia. Domestic opposition intensified. Public polling showed over 50% of Indonesians viewed the Board of Peace as a tool to permanently occupy Gaza, rather than a path to Palestinian sovereignty. Skepticism turned to fear during the UNIFIL crisis, when 3 Indonesian peacekeepers were killed in Lebanon. The deaths prompted religious and civil leaders to demand a total withdrawal from all Middle Eastern missions. Legal scholars filed lawsuits against the president, arguing his alignment with the Board of Peace violated the constitutional mandate of Bebas Aktif, Indonesia's traditional, independent, and active foreign policy. Squeezed by a tumbling currency and a grieving public, the government was left with no political capital to proceed with the deployment. The final catalyst arrived in June 2026 with a sudden military escalation between the United States and Iran. The outbreak of a wider regional war forced an immediate tactical retreat. Jakarta could not risk embroiling its national armed forces in a broader Middle Eastern proxy conflict. Faced with these pressures, President Prabowo announced the indefinite suspension of the 8,000 troop commitment, signaling the effective death of the stabilization plan. This moment validated the critics who warned from the beginning that subcontracted peacekeeping outside the UN would inevitably drag Indonesia into regional power struggles. The diplomatic collapse brought severe real-world consequences. Gaza was left without the stabilization force it was promised, leaving the territory's security in a state of deep uncertainty. For Indonesia, the suspension served as a necessary strategic correction. It allowed the Prabowo administration to preserve its traditional Bebas Aktif policy and avoid a volatile, financially draining conflict. The failure highlights a lesson for global powers. A superpower's geopolitical ambition cannot override the domestic realities and financial limits of its contributing partners. The collapse of the Indonesian deployment marks the limit of subcontracted peacekeeping.
proving that lasting stability requires the neutral, multilateral frameworks that the Board of Peace could not provide.